Hello and welcome to another edition of Razorwire. Now, today we're going to be covering DORA again, what the current situation is, what we know about it, covering some of the various different pieces of information that have been coming out recently about this new legislation that's coming out at the end of January of 2025. So I'd like to welcome back Paul Dwyer, who's going to be helping us understand a little bit more about what will be required and some of the nuances behind this brand new setup that's coming through. So here today to talk about the wonderful world of DORA, we have one of our guests from the past to come back and update us as to what's going on. We've also got like NIS2, which is again something else that we've need to really kind of discuss because it is a bit of a game changer. And I have the fantastic Paul Dwyer back here to talk to us again. Paul, do you want to kind of talk to the guys out there in the world and tell them who you are and what have you if they haven't watched the first video, which I do suggest they do?
Sure, Jim, no worries. So, I've been in this area of cybersecurity risk and compliance for over 30 years. I head up an organization known as the ICTTF, the International Cyber Threat Task Force. Many people know us from our events such as the EU DORA Summit, for example, or the EU Cyber Summit, our next one in November. I'll just get that in. But mainly now, these days, our Cyber Risk Academy, where we are sharing the knowledge, empowering leadership and so on with this business level education around these vital topics. And I really appreciate the invite to come back on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Jim, and looking forward to see where it meanders in the world of DORA.
There was a period of time after I think the legislation first sort of came out, and it was still kind of in its very, very early phases where it was relatively quiet. And I think when we spoke before, people have started talking about it. I mean, we're easily 6 months further down the line, 7 months, I think, since last we talked. I have to look back at the video to find out when we released it. But the legislation is coming in, January of next year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's January next year. It came in 2023 is the reality.
Course, yeah.
But it came in with a 2-year run-in. Okay, so basically the shape or the sketch of everything in DORA was there, and it said, "Hey guys, here's DORA. Here's what you're going to need to do, and this is effectively going to be the law across Europe from January 2025." Now, what it came along with was these these sort of updates or batches of updates that would come in. So we had a series of those batch of updates in January of this year, and we'll have another series of those on July 17th of 2024. Now, they are effectively the final piece of the puzzle, because when DORA talks about things like instant response or reporting and so on, the detail isn't in DORA at the moment, but it is in these RTS documents, these regularly technical standard documents. That's the flesh on the bone. So you don't have to wait for those to understand what you need to do, because the concepts and the obligations and so on are outlined very clearly within DORA itself. This is just the minutiae detail, if you like, comes within these regulatory technical standard documents. And they are important, and they're important to understand.
And it's a good way of doing it, in all honesty. I mean, a 2-year time scale from kind of initial kind of, bringing it on board and then finally getting it on board so you can actually kind of like meet that standard. You know what it's like here in InfoSec. I mean, 2 years is a hell of a long time. 1 minute you're dealing with one set of issues, and the next minute something, I don't know, AI suddenly kicks off. And everybody's got AI all over the place, and people start legislating towards that. And you're like, all right, okay, well, is there an AI piece in DORA yet? It's 2 years is a long time. And I think because there's another regulation called NIS2. Have you had much interaction with that as of yet?
Yeah, and look, NIS2, if you were to take the titles off these documents and speed read them, you'd actually kind of think, well, it's the same thing, because there is quite an overlap. It's, leadership are made responsible, instant reporting, all of those kind of things, heavy fines associated with them, all those kind of things. There is an interaction between them, but the most important thing from the banking sector and the financial sector overall, the infrastructure around that, including third parties, is that DORA is known as legs specialis. It's a Latin legal term meaning that it is overarching over NIS2. So if there's any confusion between the two, DORA is the show. That's the one that is the most important from the financial sector.
Yeah, because NIS2 focuses a little bit wider, doesn't it? DORA's more geared towards the financial industry and those companies that interact with the financial industry, whereas NIS, it does kind of cover a lot of that as well, but it's more towards kind of critical infrastructure stuff that kind of falls a little bit outside of that.
Yeah, it's actually, and that would be very true and highly accurate in relation to NIS1. But NIS2, I would say, what doesn't fall under it? Because pretty much only really small organizations don't fall under this because you're deemed as critical or important under NIS2. And when you look at the criteria within NIS2, it's pretty much everybody. I mean, it's what makes up society. So it's everything is in there. And when you get down into the minutiae of all the different sections, it's not just your typical critical infrastructure, like oil, gas, transport, all those kind of things. It's right down to the supporting entities of those. So anybody with more than 50 employees really needs to look at NIS2 and see if they comply. From the UK perspective, UK took on NIS1 and they were right at the forefront of implementing NIS1. Now, obviously post-Brexit, it's a little bit different, but essentially they're doing the same thing.
I mean, it's interesting. We're seeing a lot more legislation coming out at the moment. We've had lots of updates to a lot of different frameworks. ISO's gone through another one. PCI has obviously been updated, recently. Well, not recently, but
yeah, NIS 2.0 or February 26th. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, moving. Obviously, we're here to talk about DORA and NIS2, but just slightly on the wider scale of things, we're starting to see, obviously from the US and the UK. I mean, our Lord and Master Rishi Sunak got in front of everybody and said how important, like, securing AI was, for instance. Are we seeing a kind of change in the way of things going forward? Because let's be honest. I mean, go back 10 years, we had PCI. There was some legislation out there, but there was nothing like there is now. And then, boom.
Yeah, it is a game changer in many ways. Okay, so let me where I see the game changing elements of this. It's the tone within these documents. They are business orientated. They are calling out specifically that the individuals that manage an organization are responsible for, as they call it within DORA, ICT risk. We might call it information security. We might call it cybersecurity. You are responsible for the confidentiality, integrity, availability, authenticity of any digital assets that your organization relies on. Legal requirement. And one of the things that came up recently on at the EU DORA summit was we were going obviously through all of the different pillars of DORA, all of the different articles with experts from all over the world explaining all the different pieces. All fantastic. But what was coming across in some of the conversations at the breaks were people were going, "Oh, I feel like it's okay. I've got everything in place." And then, so when I went back up after lunch, I pushed in around the topic of operational resilience, because that's what it is. It's digital operational resilience, and explain to them a couple of examples that I've used in relation to kind of case study stuff. You look at things like, for example, the Royal Bank of Scotland, or even better, the Trustee Savings Bank, when they had an issue, their CIO personally got fined £81,000 for doing a crap job. Right now, that's what you're going to see with the likes of DORA. You're going to see individuals responsible. You're not going to be able to hide behind pointing at a provider or the geek in IT or whatever it happens to be, right? Those days are gone. It's a business issue. It's up at the boardroom level. It's an imperative. And I think that's the real game changer in all this kind of legislation. And when you look at something like NIST 2.0, that is a beautiful transformation in how that's evolved, because now there's 6 function areas, and one of those is governed. But more important than just the restructure of it, the reshuffling of the control outcomes, is the language that's being used. It's far simpler. It's more business level. You're not talking in terms of, critical infrastructure, one-time passwords, yada, yada, yada. All these kind of things that would confuse maybe a business person. This is very much about establishing communication within organizations as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's compounded as well. Obviously, we reported a while back now on the SEC going after the SolarWinds CISO. I mean, it's interesting what you're saying, because we are seeing a lot more push towards, governing bodies, institutions, and even sort of governments now turning around and saying, like with things like DORA and NIS2 and so on and so forth, and even with things like PCI and ISO, massive emphasis on the C-suite, the people who run the company are now the ones that need to take this seriously. And I love
Absolutely.
what I love about DORA and NIS2 is it pushes that into that C-suite. They can no longer go, yeah, we got a fella called Dave in the IT department who we got him out of university and he's putting in a bit of endpoint security, or he's looking at MFA and it's going to take us about 10 years to put it in. And it's really kind of pushing that change. And I like that momentum, but I do think to a certain extent, we've got to be a little bit careful about it because we don't want it to be too lax, but we don't want it to be too difficult, because if things like DORA and NIS2 are too difficult, it raises the bar on the minimum you need to do from a business level to be a viable business. So if you're a new business just coming in, you've got some good new technologies and new ideas, all of a sudden you've got all these requirements that you need to meet as well. It can get pretty tough. It's like, remember the old banking regulation? They made it so complicated that you don't see any new challenger banks anymore because it's too difficult with the minimum standards you need to meet that nobody wants to invest in it.
And that's a good point you're making, Jim, because like the thing is that what I'm finding as well is there's so many individuals out there with a background, let's say, for example, in IT, who, when they look at something like DORA, they expect to see a list of controls that they're meant to implement.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works, right? It's risk-based. So it's based on what's known as the proportionality principle. So it's also an opportunity for organizations to dispel and get rid of that culture of compliance versus security. Pivot to a risk-centric approach. It's all about being risk-based. So if you're a small organization, it's about proportionality of the risk and the kind of controls you put in place. Going back to, probably done this hand gesture a million times about calculating inherent risk. What is your inherent risk level? Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10 is here. Where should your control be? It should be at that level. If it's below that level, that gap is your residual risk. If your maturity or your mitigation, your control is above that, well, are you wasting money here, especially if you have gaps down below in other areas within the organization? And that's why, for example, as I know, around our Cyber Prism solution identifies those things and plugs in around the kind of investment to where it's going across the framework. So this is an opportunity. It's a catalyst for management and leaders to turn around and take a fresh look at how they operate. They shouldn't be seeing IT as just a cost on the bottom line. Security is an investment, not a cost. And it's all the derived benefits of that. And not just the financial entities, I should add. This is a huge opportunity for ICT providers, because the law is going to be that the management board of Bank ABC is responsible for whatever their suppliers are essentially doing. So they're going to go with the providers that can prove or provide assurance and confidence that they are compliant with DORA and such regulations. Now, if the others can't or won't, through arrogance, right? Well, they're in a whole different crosshair situation, and people will move, and not just within their own country. It's Europe, so they can go to wherever they want to get those providers, even globally. So once they can provide evidence that they are compliant with it. So I think there's a massive opportunity there for small, mid-sized players to start eating the lunch of these big cloud providers that they're essentially put in place, because I know that these big providers are turning up to our sessions and so on like that, and they're kind of scratching their head a little bit and going, oh, we didn't realize this was huge.
Wait, security for the first time.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you've got to do security. I should have invited Jack Jones on this. So I interviewed Jack Jones, the guy that was the created the kind of FAIR framework. He's fantastic, and he's all about the risk-based approach. And the thing I like about DORA and NIS2 is it's all about the risk of the instant response. It's as you're absolutely right. It's not a set of standard compliance requirements like a lot of companies are used to. I mean, there's elements in there. They say, have this, have that. You need to kind of consider this kind of stuff. But it is very open-ended because I think finally somebody's realised, there's lots of different companies out there with lots of different situations, with lots of different assets and lots of different risks. It's so different from organisation to organisation. You can't create. I mean, I'm going to be unfair to Cyber Essentials now. I look at something like Cyber Essentials, I have a bit of a laugh. It's like it's nothing. It's giving you a false sense of security. So you hear people say, "Oh, we're Cyber Essentials," and I'm like, as an InfoSec professional, I look at it and I kind of laugh a little bit. I realise that security can be difficult. Yes, it can be, but don't boil it to the absolute barest minimum so it becomes tick box like Cyber Essentials. NIS2, DORA. I mean,
Cyber Essentials has its place, but like you say, when you're dealing with something that's critical like the financial sector, which is made up of these tiny companies, mid-sized companies, large companies, all interconnected, and then all the supply chain and all those kind of pieces. When people are filling out questionnaires, their mindset's going to change beyond the tick box mentality when they realize there's criminal penalties, there's personal fines, it's career-changing stuff. I mean, that CIO of TSB, I believe, is down in South America now working in IT somewhere. So, I mean, there's just anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that it was a dramatic change to his life on what was going on, and it is an opportunity. Change brings opportunity. It is something essential. Legislation is always going to be behind innovation. And we're innovating at the speed of light, right? So, and compliance is always going to be the lowest baseline. So when people look at DORA and they start getting through, say, and I will say to them, I'll say, there's nothing in here that you shouldn't be doing from a network management point of view or a cybersecurity point of view. There are some critical things that you come across like, oh, do I have a crisis communication officer and all that? However, once you start peeling it back, you realize the workload involved in proving you are doing what you say you do. And there's also a massive legal burden to redoing contracts and everything else like that, or assuring those contracts are in place and they have the right aspects to them and everything else like that. So I don't give anyone the illusion that this is just going to be, oh yeah, we have great security in place. We'll just review it against DORA and we will be fine. Everybody is finding it. I use this image of the nested Russian dolls, because as you open one piece of DORA, you see another, and you see another, and you see another, and it just gets deeper into layers and layers and layers within it. And that's going to continue to evolve way past January 2025. All of these things, NIS2, DORA, the CEO, the Cybersecurity Act, GDPR, they are not competing with each other. They're complementing each other to create a secure digital infrastructure and society. And that's what all this is about. This is the game plan of the EU.
And I think it's the right way of doing it. I think it's a real breath of fresh air, in all honesty. I mean, the accountability piece and the enforcement piece especially, because one of the problems we've always had in InfoSec is, we communicate the risks, we communicate some of the problems and difficulties we think an organisation can face. Our job is to secure that organisation and its key assets from loss, be it an internal loss, be it an external loss, or whatever. That's the role that we have. But there's always that kind of what if, but that's never happened. Oh God, I used to hate that. Why would anybody just hack us? That's never happened in the past. That's never happened to us in the past. And it was a really frustrating aspect of what we did, because there was no accountability at the top end. And you've even seen it kind of recently as well, where people have been throwing their CISOs under the bus. They have a security issue, and it's usually the CEO will stand up and go, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," and blah blah blah, step down and take a gold parachute, and off they float on the waves of change to the next thing.
To speak at an event.
Leading the poor CISO behind battle lines, getting shot at badly with no cover. And now this is going to rapidly change. I think we're going to see, obviously, a lot more CISOs at least advising the board, or maybe even part of the board going forward.
Yeah, and I think that brings with it the skill set of leaders that are responsible for cyber digital security. Right, because you not just need to understand technology, and all of that side. But you need to have an understanding of how the business operates, because whatever you're going to do and implement strategically has to be aligned with the business strategy. You need to understand the legal and regulatory landscape. That's why we see $1 million CISO jobs out there of people that have that hybrid set of skills, because they're they're like unicorns. They're so hard to find, to get those kind of people the skills. So as a career path, and obviously through the Cyber Risk Academy, we're getting lots of these kind of individuals, leaders who are augmenting their skills and go, yeah, I need to understand NIS2, I need to understand DORA, I need to understand how you manage cyber risk in an organization. That's the gap of knowledge. A lot of people will have the IT, ICT, the cybersecurity piece, but they don't have that piece. And that's what's essential, absolutely essential now to be at that leadership piece. I don't even mean on the board. I mean, even just being able to communicate with the board level. Because we've seen that even, for example, in Bermuda, they brought out this thing called the code. And essentially it was NIST chopped up into a NIS2 1.1, chopped up and created into a cybersecurity framework, and saying anybody who operates here in the insurance industry has to comply with the code. But part of that was they were realizing that the people, because of Bermuda, and they wouldn't have access to an extensive population of cybersecurity experts, a lot of that would be done remotely. And so, dare I say, a lot of that was tick box. Oh, we have a guy called Dave, and he's over in the UK, and he's our IT geek, and he comes on a call now and again, all that. Now they realize, what are the credentials? What are the background? This is the guy who's going to keep us out of jail. This is the guy who's going to keep our careers intact, because she needs to be able to do a fantastic job, or he needs to be able to do a brilliant job, whatever it is, in that space. And that's how important it is. Like, it really, really is that important. So all of the legislation you see anywhere from Singapore, Australia, the United States, it's all about making leadership now responsible for this. Like that case study there I mentioned, the TSB. Okay, they had a failure of an upgrade that happened. Okay,
Yeah.
and the human impact of that was, there was a guy got stuck in jail. He couldn't pay his fine. In Mexico, there was a guy they were threatening to turn off his life support machine because his family couldn't transfer over the money. There was house purchases. All these kind of things were all going on. Yeah, and thousands of transactions left. But with the TSB one in particular, as opposed to the RBS one, 80,000 customers walked away. 80,000 customers, because they were down for 232 days.
That is a long time, yeah.
232 days. Now, where was the operation resilience? Where was the backups done before the upgrade? Where was the rollback plan? Where were all these kind of things? And that's what DORA is about, is make sure these things can't happen again. That is absolutely crazy. But the big thing is, forget the fines, forget the cost of the incident. The TSB in that case went from a profit-making bank to a loss-making bank over that one incident.
Yeah.
And a couple of years later, this guy gets his fine as well from the PRA. So this is kind of groundbreaking stuff, and it's what they want to avoid. People who may have all the best excuses in the world, and they're under pressure, and they're reactive in the IT department with low resources, so on. They're making these decisions to maybe upgrade something and skipping the steps that we know are important. Because if something goes wrong, it's all about hackers. This is about just operational resilience, fat fingers, global warming. These are all factors.
It really annoys me that people speak as though all we are kind of glorified IT people. It's like, no, there's so much more to InfoSec. It's called information security for a reason. Okay, cybersecurity is the sexier way of saying InfoSec these days. But if you've been in the game for longer than 5 years, most people still call themselves an information security professional. It's not about the cyber.
And we talked about the information economy even then, and then now we're in the digital economy, and so when it's cyber, digital, whatever, this revolution of everything that every big business in the world. You look even at an airline. An airline is processing information. Just by the way, they actually have a fleet of planes, and they go from A to B. But they're running a retail outlet in the sky. They're processing hundreds of thousands of transactions a day on their websites. It's an IT system. It's processing information. That's what it's about. That's money these days. It's not even physical.
No, absolutely.
And we've got the digital euro coming as well. So, we're going to have the crypto element of that as well. Yeah. So, it's never been more important. And I think the the clever leaders already get that, obviously, right? And they understand that the kind of threats that are out there from a cyber perspective, can wipe you out in seconds and change the whole playing field. They're not like normal kinds of threats. But even Christine Lagarde, pre-COVID, president of the European Central Bank, had come out to say that she felt a cyber attack on the financial sector could cause a liquidity crisis because of that interconnected and independent nature. So, this is the reality that true leaders actually see this, acknowledge this, and say, we need to do something about this. And DORA is about harmonizing and making it easier for everybody. If everybody's on the same sheet, it just makes it easier. Everybody doing things in the same way, reporting back in the same way, everything else like that. Well, then, it's a rising tide lifts all ships. And, as security generally will get better right across the sector, right across the supply chain, everything else. And everybody has to have a part of that responsibility, including the customers of the banks.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, just zeroing in on some of what you said there, about the nature of security. I mean, I spoke at UK Cyber Week a couple of weeks back, and I gave this kind of like scenario of this tribe of monkeys, and the first one that stood up and picked up a jawbone and clubbed his neighbour over the head and nicked his stuff, and I said during the talk in a roundabout way, it was a little bit more eloquent than that. Security hasn't really changed since we were beating one another over the heads with a rock, for each other's food. It's just the landscape and the assets have changed over time, and we got pretty good at doing like threat intelligence and threat management and risk management and understanding. It's no different really. But as I said, the battlefield and the landscape has dramatically changed, and we haven't kept up with it. We haven't kept up with some of the principles of security from the past, and this is why I like DORA. And I think the only I think the only significant challenge, other than the fact that I can hear the vendors getting ready and warming up their pens to sell their products as DORA compliant and what have you, which I'm guessing we'll start to see relatively quickly in the on LinkedIn and the various other media, is the section around kind of information sharing. I'm still unsure of how this is going to work because, let's be honest, as you know, Paul, big company has an event, a security event. They're not the greatest at kind of communicating exactly what has happened. It's not necessarily in their best interest as a business because they don't really want to discuss that they had vulnerabilities and they either ignored them or they had vulnerabilities and they didn't know about them, or that they still have vulnerabilities. You don't always necessarily want to communicate that out to the big wide world because there are a lot of people listening. But we do need, one of the key factors of information security, and what I love so much about the industry of InfoSec professionals, is we're all really open. We talk with one another, we give one another ideas. Yeah, okay, there's a few interesting egos in there that you've got to navigate around. But as a general rule, we're actually quite a friendly and interesting bunch, I like to think. I've been in it for 27 years. And, let's look at you and I. Every time we jump on one of these podcasts, we end up talking for 30 minutes before we even start the record button, But how is this going to work? Because, InfoSec people are good at chatting. But we do have to be careful because we are employed by these organizations. They don't necessarily want information to be released that they were vulnerability or had a vulnerability, they ignored it, whatever, or the exact nature of what occurred. Whereas for an InfoSec professional, it's quite important to understand how attacks are occurring. What's the attack pattern that was used on you for that event? Two InfoSec people would be more than happy to have a chat about it, usually quietly down the pub over a pint. But how is this information sharing piece within DORA and NIS, because that seems to be kind of a key function of what they're saying going forward? Or are they still looking to kind of work out how that's going to work?
So it's a distinctive pillar on its own. That's why it's so important. And there's many aspects to the information sharing. So, for example, there's information sharing internally to make sure that, for example, leadership knows what's happening at an operational level, and it's technical till operational. There's information sharing across the financial sector itself, and there's lots of groups already set up that do a pretty good job at sharing information around those kind of things. There's lessons learned and sharing information internally and externally through your supply chain post incidents, those kind of things. It's and then we look at the word information, we go, well, what about intelligence sharing? So what's the difference between information and intelligence? Okay. So information, actionable information, in other words, information I could do something about or I should do something about, is intelligence. Okay. So you can have intelligence about certain vulnerabilities and what's happening. And by, that's kind of well handled to different providers and organizations within this sector. So there's another kind of intelligence, I'd say. Um, Razorthorn are a great company to deal with, and they do fantastic vulnerability management, pen testing services, whatever. There's intelligence I've just shared. Now, so for example, we have a DORA community, and that's where it's flourishing, is because that peer-to-peer group isn't being sold to, isn't being told what it is. It's the group talking to themselves and sharing intelligence at that level and saying, oh, have you heard of the Cyber Prism solution from CRI? That has a DORA compliance module that can manage where you are from a compliance perspective and show you everything, and what you need to do and prioritize and yada, yada, yada. That kind of intelligence sharing is just as important, I would say, because you're right. And you're right to have that little bit of cynicism, Jim, in relation to the industry. Maybe we're there long enough to know there's a lot of snake oil in this industry. There's a lot of people that should be probably selling Kirby Hoovers door to door, but they're not. And that they're outselling the latest flashy system, popping on a network, it lights up like a Christmas tree, and it's a six-figure sum because they've just bamboozled someone with something about Bayesian algorithms or whatever it happens to be, right? And they think that they're all secure now, right? Okay, you get where I'm going from, right?
I was there when GDPR first came out, and every solution I saw in this space was like, GDPR, it will help you with GDPR. It's like, oh, for the love of God.
So with that, yeah, and with that in mind, we have to look at the fundamentals of this, and the fundamentals of what DORA is. It's essentially an ICT risk management framework. Now, the first thing, let's start at the basics. It goes, what are your critical important functions? And you go, oh, I know what that is. That's our banking app. Okay, what's your banking app made up of? What are the systems behind it? Okay, who are the providers behind it? Where's the data?
Mm.
Okay, it's on that network. What are the ingress and egress points on that network? Okay, now I have a couple of questions for you. Would you know if information was traversing north and south on that network? Okay, what about east and west?
Yeah.
That's DORA.
Yeah.
It's manners. It's basic manners. It's the manners of your network management. It's the manners of your cybersecurity systems, your information security systems. It's got ISMS in there. It's got, network management in there. It's got crisis management. It's got procurement. It's got legal. It's got governance. It's got all the different pieces all mashed up so that you can ignore nothing. And so if you are doing
third-party risk management as well. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
I mean, that... again, you've seen elements of it in other, you've got it in ISO, a bit in there ISO, you've got a bit in PCI as well. PCI is a little bit stronger because of the nature of how it works. But what I love about DORA is that, you've got to understand who your suppliers are, what their risk factors are, how do they interact with you as an organization, and what key services are they offering. And it pushes that security down the chain, as opposed to forcing it on one.
Yeah, it brings it all back to that one piece, which is the management board responsible. So once that penny drops with the management board and they realize that they're responsible for what that provider is doing and what that provider's contractors are doing, and if they're outsourcing it to someone else, what they're doing, well, then they're going to look for assurance, level 4 evidence that people are doing what they say they do. Anybody can fill out a little compliance spreadsheet. Oh, there we go. Tick, tick, tick. We're doing all that. And it goes through. But those days are gone because you need to trust, but verify everything. You need to get the evidence. So a lot of organizations now, what their battle is, what their challenge is gathering that evidence. So I can tell you probably without knowing anything behind the scenes on this, but if somebody had went into the trustee savings bank before they had that failed update and down for 232 days and yada, 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 and asked them if they have a change management procedure, they were on, there we go. Yes, there she is, fresh logo on it and everything else that looks lovely and everything else like that. There's the document and signed off. You've got your change management procedure. Okay. Level 4 is show me the records of when that was last used.
Yeah. Where's your wargaming?
Show me where you created your backups, your rollback plans, everything else like that. I want to know you're actually doing what you say you do. Everybody has the policies and procedures to download the templates, to stick the logos in, and they think that's enough to get them away with something. That will not work with DORA. That will simply not work. You have to have a document known as a DORS, DORS, which is a Digital Operation Resilience Strategy document, which is completely aligned to your business strategy.
Mm.
So now, forget it's called DORS. It should really be called cyber strategy or really be called IT strategy. I hate to think that organizations are running DORA separately to their overall ICT risk management framework, IT risk management framework, digital framework, whatever you want to call it, because it's holistic. What is not included in DORA for an organization? It has all the appropriate principles that should be done, governance oversight, third-party risk management, operational resilience testing. It's got everything in there. Everything's in there. So just adapt that holistically as a framework of the organization and be able to measure back under the 5 pillars to a regulator what's going on, everything else. And the way we're helping organizations do that is by leveraging something like, for example, NIST 2.0, even NIST 1.1. It's fine, because these kind of frameworks are ubiquitous. They've been out there a long time. But even better, there's a lot of free research and material available. You don't need to do all the grunt work because you can find these. So, for example, with NIST 2.0, the new version of it, you have a privacy tool that will map it out to all the different privacy standards. They've taken the informative references from the core, and they now have a separate tool that will map off whatever you're doing to all these other different standards, including PCI and 27001 and yada, yada, yada. It's all being done for you. So all the grunt work is done. So if you're able to measure your DORA compliance to NIST 2.0, for example, it makes your life a lot easier because NIST, you can measure it out to everything else. So just adapting that flexible approach, coming in with a holistic framework, understanding what you're doing, your current state profile, create a target state profile, and then create that maturity roadmap, make sure you're gathering all the evidence as you're doing that along. Then you're what's called DORA compliant.
Okay. I mean, you're having a lot of different conversations. I know that you're booked out. You were telling me that you're fully booked on sort of advising companies are starting to look going down this line, learning a little bit more about it. You've got a great sort of set of advisories that I know that you offer to organizations, who are confused about this and they really want to understand a little bit more. I mean, what are the key concerns you're seeing from these individuals who are looking at this? I mean, not necessarily quite from InfoSec professionals. You read through the requirement, well, not the requirements, I keep calling them the requirements. You read through the documentation, and it all makes a lot of good sense, and it allows you to kind of go, right, okay, now I obviously need to possibly up my incident response a little bit by testing it, maybe with more gaming. It allows you to kind of really consider what you need to buff up within your organization. But for those organizations that are coming in blind, maybe they don't have an InfoSec professional, or maybe they've got an InfoSec professional who's very, very green. I've seen a lot of green InfoSec. Well, I've seen a lot of green CISOs, actually. A lot of people who, I've worked in IT for like 30 years, so I'm going to move into a CISO position, and they move in and go, there's a lot more to this than what I originally thought, putting in a firewall and putting in some endpoint security.
And I have to talk to people.
I
have to be able to communicate.
Yeah. What are your key kind of concerns you're seeing out of a lot of the people who are not necessarily in the space who are starting to look at DORA? The types of people you're talking to, the concerns that they have. What are you seeing?
So it's a great question because there's many aspects to this. So as you know, we have the DORA Certified Compliance Specialist course, and we've now over 1,000 alumni have gone through that course online. And they're a mixture of financial entities, ICT companies, advisory companies, everything else like that. They're simply trying to get to grips with DORA itself and understand how it fits. And what that has spawned off is a certain amount of, say, for example, industry organizations that want to align their services and products to DORA. Okay, so we're helping them with that, for example. Then, of course, you've got the financial entities themselves. We've created a DORA compliance support program that helps them with that. We provide them the AI tools. We provide them the assessment tools, the educational paths, the live advisory session, all those kind of things, right? So we're seeing lots of that. But the big piece was, the big catalyst for this was, I'm pushing too much, but I wrote this book on DORA, right? And there's section in this, right?
Well,
Everyone
what's the
goes through
name of the
this.
book for those who are
It's
listening
called
rather than?
Navigating DORA. It's up on Amazon. Okay, and if you turn up any of the live events, I sell these for Greyhound Rescue Center at the live events, right? But when you start getting into this and you start getting down into attestation points, that's what lines up. So there's actually, I think it's close to 300 attestation points. Now, an attestation point is basically something the board should be able to confidently and competently attest to is in place, or they're not DORA compliant. So we reversed engineer out of all of the DORA stuff and gone, right, what is this actually saying to the board of what they should have in place? And when you start looking at this, I'm just going to randomly pick any of the pages here. So here's one, for example. We have an internal governance and control framework effectively managing ICT risk, consistent with Article 6.4 of DORA, securing a high level of digital operation resilience as required by Article 5.1. Do you have that? Yes or no? Move down a bit. Our management body has implemented policies designed to maintain high levels of data availability, authenticity, integrity, and confidentiality in line with Article 5.2 of DORA. Hundreds of them in here, right? And so this serves as a kind of a reference document then for everybody from an operational point of view. They go, he has the mapping in there for NIST, how to do that. Blah, blah, blah. But when you start, I only get through 5 or 6 of those with a board. They're and they're moving on the chair and all that, and they go, okay, we're going to have another meeting, and all of a sudden there's budgets available. All of a sudden this is seen as something that's holistic and business orientated. I was dealing with $1 billion company from the United States of America who thought DORA was a pen testing requirement. Right. Right. So and to start at the start of this podcast, you were talking about, it was quite quiet about everything and blah blah blah. It is quiet because the regulators aren't making that much noise about this at the moment, right? And why is that? Right? Because they're busy. Because if you look at DORA, there's huge chunks of it is their homework too. They're off doing their homework. How are they going to audit people? How are they going to charge for that audit? How will that work? How will they share their intelligence from the reports and their findings up to the ESAs for that annual report that will come out? All of those things. So they're busy with their head down, and they have a deadline too, and they're working on that. But when that deadline hits, the last piece of this puzzle chip arrives on July 17th. And I think a lot of people are just waiting for that last little piece and going, oh yeah, well then we know everything that's required.
Is that the reporting section?
What we're going to get really dig deep into it, whatever. But where are the resources? Where are the DORA experts? I mean, I'm training now groups of 50 at a time for advisory firms because they have the demand.
Yeah, we're getting quite a few people coming to us actually about DORA now. It's obviously gaining steam, but it's something that you mentioned. It's like, how is this going to get audited? How is this going to get reported? And more importantly, if there is a breach, if an organization suffers a breach where, whoever the legislative body is finally going to be, suspects that there's been, some culpability required by the powers that be within that organization, the C-suite, whoever. How is that going to work? Or is that still yet a bit loosely defined?
No, it's not loose. It's very well defined after the last round of updates in January. So, and the timelines and what within 24 hours, what has to happen within a week, what happens, all those kind of things. And
what about the audit side of it, though? Are they going to have auditors?
They're going to have auditors. So what they're doing, every state will have its competent authority. So, for example, in Ireland, that's the Central Bank of Ireland. Now, the onus there's a couple of ways this can happen. One is there'll be the normal kind of supervisory stuff where the competent authority reaches out and says, I want to have a chat with you to see how you're going with DORA and all that kind of stuff. All that will go on. But then there's the reality of probably how the first ones, I imagine, will manifest themselves. So internally, things happen all the time and you keep it quiet. No one should know, right? But here's the thing about banks, and when people realize this point is, from a governance perspective, there are individuals that work in a bank and are paid on the payroll and all that kind of stuff. They work for the bank, but really they answer to the competent authority. So you might be in the IT department. You go, no, guys, listen, we're all on the same team here. We're in Banana Bank, and no one's going to mention this outside. But it's their job, and they're in the room to report. Okay, so the competent authority. It's a legal requirement, right? and that they will report that. So then it gets reported, and then the investigations will come. Now, let's be realistic here. Okay, they're not going to have. Oh God, this is going to. I'm going to be killed for saying this, right? Let's say they're not going to have. They're not going to have Jim and Paul on the auditing team, right? They're going to have people who are at different stages of their career. That was quite political how I said that, wasn't it? Yeah. So they're going to have people who come in and have set checklists of things they're looking for. And then they'll dive deeper and then they'll escalate and so on like that. So if you're not in a position to provide confidence and give them trust signals from the very start that you have your act together, then they're going to do their job. They're going to pull in those little bits of string and go, well, why didn't you have those records available? Why didn't you have this? Why didn't you have that? And even that preliminary first batch list that they look for is quite extensive. The things they will look for. But if you're struggling to go, oh, well, come back in 3 days, we'll have that somewhere. I don't know where those documents are. I don't know where those records are, or whatever. You have to have your act together. You have to have your act together. It's a bit like, yeah, I'm sure you've been through this with the PCI and ISO 27001. You will do a rehearsal on it. You want to be ready for the auditor when they come in, and the kind of things they're going to look for, who they're going to talk to. And remember, this is everybody in the financial organization. There's a legal requirement to train every individual employee. Right? There's only a handful of organizations so far have taken our DORA awareness training programs because people are still up at that level of, we need to get the board trained, we need to get our DORA compliance officer and team trained. And now they're going, well, what about staff? Oh, I didn't realize that. And there's actually another element, which is you need to train your suppliers.
Mm.
Right? It's in there as well. So there's a huge element of that. And step one for all of this is leadership understanding DORA. That's step one. If the leadership don't understand this, then it's the tail wagging the dog, that whole story. It's going to be a struggle. You're going to wait till it fails until someone's head rolls and they go back up to leadership and they say, oh, we didn't really realize that. The previous guy that we just fired never told us that, blah, blah, blah. So this is a leadership issue, and they have to be empowered with the knowledge to understand. They don't need to be techies. They don't need to get into the granularity of it, but they need to understand these core concepts. That's why, I wrote this book as well, because in this, it actually explains to them, that it's their neck on the line and what they should be doing and what good looks like. And it empowers them enough. For example, when we get into controls, we actually talk about, here's a checklist you might want to ask your CIO or your IT provider. Here's some things just to validate, because we understand the management team, this isn't their bag maybe, and it's not where they come from. So let's give them some questions that they can validate what they're being told. Because yourself, someone comes and says, oh, we did a pen test. What does that mean?
Well, yeah.
So what kind of pen test did you do? Was it a threat-led penetration test? Where the reports, what was identified?
Mobile app.
Yeah, exactly. All of those pieces. So there's a huge amount to it, Jim, and we welcomed it, embraced it. We're doing the same with our clients as well, from the advisory piece, from providing our own tool sets such as Cyber Prism, our GPT tool. I mean, we built a generative AI tool around this because, quite simply, it's really hard to keep up with all of the DORA stuff, and it melts your head a little bit. And so, when we looked at this and how it interacts with things like MiFID and things like NIS2 and so on, you look at ChatGPT, for example. ChatGPT, cutoff point on data, maybe April. It hallucinates, it makes up things, but even worse than that, it searches for stuff on Bing. Right. So you type in something about DORA, and it's going to come back and it's going to pick up something out of a search engine and tell you that is fact. Now you're going to take that as fact and you're going to work with that within your organization and things, but it's not. So when we created DORA GPT, our AI tool, what we did was we looked at the ESA's, European Supervisory Authorities. We looked at all their individual websites. We looked at every single thing they'd ever published about DORA, and we took all of that information, we put it into the GPT. So it is the pure source, the integrity of the information there. It's not what some Dave, expert, thinks in yonder in some program and he's interpreted it some way, or Sally's interpreted another way, and they publish something on it, and then that's poisoning your knowledge on it. This is the pure source of knowledge. So when things like the RTS documents come out, we put them straight into our GPT tool. It understands them. You're then able to interrogate them and ask it to do things. And this is one of our clients referred to it as the Swiss Army knife of DORA. And quite frankly, it is, like, 'cause we use it for everything: creating presentations, creating checklists for dealing with suppliers, creating draft documents, all those kind of things, everything, and it's related to. And we wouldn't be able to help as many clients as we are without that. And so we've made that available through our courses, our training courses. There's a handful of clients we work with where we've given them a bespoke version of it, and they put their own data into it as well, so the tool can actually interrogate their own information, see where they are. So, but that's a few of the larger banks. But generally speaking, we make this tool available to the training because we don't want to just put it out there and everybody's just playing with it and everything else like that. You need to be on a learning path, so you know what you're asking, you know what you're doing, everything else like that. And it's a fantastic interactive learning tool, dare I say, a consultative kind of tool as well. There's not one day passes I don't use it.
Fantastic. And definitely anybody out there looking to figure out what they need to do with DORA, definitely get in contact with Paul, get in contact with his organisation and ask it. And one last question before we finish.
Sure.
Is this scaring people? Is this scaring boards? Is it something that they are really getting concerned about?
Brilliant question. The best question on this, because the reality is the clever ones. It is. When I'm on a call, and sometimes it's a client prospect call, and the client starts going, sure, they'll probably give us a grace period. And sure, we've seen all this before with GDPR or whatever. I don't want to deal with those clients. They don't get it. Right? This is a fundamental change on how all of this is going to be handled. And quite happily work with everybody that wants to do something, is taking it seriously. But if people are coming in with a wrong attitude to this, a cynicism and sure, I've seen it all and all that kind of stuff, that won't work, because this is a fresh perspective. So we're seeing lots and lots of organizations, and the demand is literally month on month. I'd hate to hazard a guess, but I would say probably increasing by about 20%. I mean, like we were saying to you before the call here, was that we kind of are flat out now for the rest of the year in relation to commitments and everything else like that. And so we're looking at now how we scale that and provide for more. So we're doing it through things like the training and all that kind of stuff as well. But there's an insatiable demand there. So we are working with other companies where we're helping them to craft their solutions to be able to be DORA compliant as well, because this was a concept we have of a DORA Center of Excellence, which we launched at the EU DORA Summit. And it was about getting all the right kind of providers together, which we knew really get DORA, really understand it, and can provide a proper DORA type service to an organization. And I don't just mean advisory. I mean something that will do network management brilliantly, something that will do, instant response brilliantly, whatever it has to be. But if it's in line with DORA, because that's what the organizations need. They're going to go through this piece of, what is it? Why should I do it? Then how do I do it? And then it's going to be, oh shit, how do I do it now?
And it'll be 5 minutes before it goes live.
Yeah. And they need to be able to point at something and go, okay, these are the best people in the world to deal with. And the list of companies.
Well, you are definitely the leading authority in this particular space, I'll be honest.
Thank you for that.
Well, having been in this game for 27 years and seeing things come and go and different trends come and go and all the rest of it, I think DORA's definitely one of the bigger changes that we've seen in years. There have been a few fun ones over the years, but I think this is going to spread, and I can see elements of this coming into other places where Europe isn't. Obviously the UK kind of tends to fall in line, but let's face it, the States has been wrestling with this themselves, not DORA itself, but it's like anything. Everybody will look at something that works and goes, we need some version of that. So this is going to be here to stay. I think it's going to be something that's going to change the way us InfoSec people are able to deliver what we do best, and it might actually kind of enhance some of the things that we've been saying for a while in the minds of the C-suite, that they do need to deal with their risks, because if they don't, you're going to come a cropper, especially if you're in Europe or associated with a company in the space in Europe where DORA is a thing. So if any of you out there want to learn about DORA, Paul and his company do a fantastic set of courses. Look him up on LinkedIn, get in touch with him. Paul, what's your website where people can get in touch with you? Is it the one behind you?
Yeah, the best place to point people is to ICTTF.org, ICTTF.org. And from there, they'll see the Cyber Academy, they'll see the different training courses, the different live events we have going on as well. And I'd remind people we have coming up is the EU Cyber Summit. That's a 2-day event in November in Dublin, live event. And what we're covering off is everything from GDPR, CER, the Cybersecurity Act, DORA, NIS2, all of the important pieces of EU legislation over a 2-day period. All of them, and delegates will actually get an internationally recognized qualification out of that as well. And of course, we'll have a tech expo as part of that as well to show how solution providers can help organizations do that as well. So that's a big one. It's our biggest event of the year. It's the EU Cyber Summit, and it's on November 7th and 8th, if I have my dates right. But eucybersummit.com is the web address for that. eucybersummit.com.
Sounds like I need to bring along my camera and my portable. My portable mic,
because there'll be some networking done after the second day.
Yeah, InfoSec people in the bar. I think InfoSec people in any but no, absolutely. We'll definitely. I'm definitely going to try and come along to that one. So all of you out there, thank you ever so much for sitting and listening to us talk and kind of revisit DORA. We're probably going to be doing this a couple of times over the next couple of months, especially as new information comes out. What was that next date that we can expect another batch come out from them?
That's July 17th. And they tend to drop late in the day, but so we actually have an event on in Dublin the next day to go through all of those RTS documents with our DORA community group. So if people go on to ICTTF.org, that will be posted up there, that event up in the event section. More than welcome to register to attend that as well, to come along. And in that, we'll have a peer group of the financial sector across Europe and the providers. There's actually a barbecue on as well on the day, so to network afterwards and go through.
We're all going to be at a barbecue drinking beer
the next day
through the requirements.
Yeah, because thanks to the power of AI, I will be explaining everything in it the next day on the 18th and go through, because it's the last piece of the puzzle. And then what we'll do is we'll be focusing on what are those last steps of compliance people can do between there and the deadline.
Fantastic. Right. Well, we'll make sure that if you're watching this on YouTube or any of the channels where there's a description that we can write in below, not all of the channels we release, or not all the mediums we release with the podcast stuff, we can do this. But if you need to have a look, go and have a look at Paul's website to find out about those events. We'll put some details in the description below if you're looking at this on YouTube or whatever, so you can kind of either go over to there and have a look at them, or you can see about what's going on. Paul, it's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I've got a sneaky suspicion we're going to have a couple more reviews of DORA and the situation with DORA and what have you before the end, or before the beginning. Is it a beginning or an end? Who knows?
Yeah, it's the end of the start of the end. It's one or the other, but we'll figure it all out.
We'll do that over a beer. And if any of you want us to join us on that beer, we'll definitely happy sit down and have a chat with you, especially if you're buying. So thank you, Paul, and thank you to all of you out there who are sort of watching this, and we'll be seeing you again soon. And thank you for listening or even watching the latest edition of Razorwire. It's always good to get feedback. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to us via LinkedIn or through our website, www.razorthorn.com. If you feel that there's something that we should cover maybe a little bit more in depth, a new topic, or something of interest to you or the community at large. We'll even do interviews. If you've got any recommendations or you want us to interview people, we'll reach out to those individuals and see if we can get them on camera, so we can ask them the important questions about InfoSec. So it'd be great to see what your feedback is. In addition, I do have a book recently come out, the Cyber Sentinels Handbook, a primer for information security professionals. Now, this book is very much geared up towards professionals at all levels of their career, be they starters, be they newcomers, be they people who've been in it for a little while and maybe looking for a little bit more direction, albeit the older ones looking to maybe reground themselves in some of the more important aspects of the trade that maybe they've forgotten over time. I've had lots of good feedback from a lot of different readers of a lot of different levels, so please feel free to get yourselves a copy. We've got the e-copy, we've also got the paperback copy, and if you don't want to spend any money, you can go on Kindle Unlimited and read the book for free there as well. So thank you ever so much again. Look after yourselves, and we'll be seeing you again soon.